When the brisk autumn wind rolls in and the nights fill with gloom, we gather to hear stories about the things that will make your blood run cold. Dim the lights, lock your doors, and do not look out your windows. You've now entered the darkness of horror. Welcome to October's Curse.
On the outskirts of town, where the trees grew thick and the wind whispered secrets, there lay an abandoned cemetery. Most of the gravestones had crumbled into the earth, worn down by time and neglect. The iron gate was rusted, and the stone walls, covered in ivy, seemed to guard nothing but silence. The locals had long stopped visiting, their superstitions growing over the years into whispers of strange happenings. But on one chilly autumn evening, a curious teenager named Max decided to see for himself. He had heard the rumors, the ones about the glowing grave in the farthest corner of the cemetery. The stories were vague, told in hushed tones. Some said it had been there for years, while others swore it had only appeared recently, its eerie light casting an unnatural glow under the moonlight. Max, intrigued by the idea of a mysterious glowing grave, ventured into the cemetery just as twilight began to settle. The wind howled through the trees, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. As he wandered deeper into the cemetery, the only sound was the crunch of dry leaves under his boots. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting long, haunting shadows on the broken stones. He found the grave as the stories had described it, tucked away in the farthest corner, hidden from the eyes of most visitors. It was a large, ornate headstone, far more elaborate than the others, gleaming almost as if it had been polished recently. But what struck him was the light. A faint, sickly glow emanated from the ground around the gravestone, flickering like a candle's flame caught in the wind. Max stood frozen, transfixed by the sight. He reached out, almost as if compelled, but hesitated. There was something wrong about it. Something unnatural. As he drew closer, the ground beneath him seemed to hum. The glow brightened, flickering erratically, as if it had a life of its own. He could feel the temperature drop, a cold so deep it chilled him to the bone. Then, the whispering started. It was faint at first, a barely audible murmur that seemed to echo from the grave itself. Max's heart raced. The voices were soft but insistent, like a chant. The air felt thick, suffocating, as though the cemetery itself had come alive around him. The grave's light pulsed in time with the whispers, growing brighter, and then, without warning, it exploded in a flash of blinding white. Max stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the intense glare. When the light finally dimmed, he found himself standing alone in the graveyard once again, the silence pressing in on him like a weight. But the grave was no longer empty. A figure now knelt at the grave. It was a woman, dressed in tattered clothes, her long, tangled hair hanging in front of her face. She didn't move or speak, but Max could feel her presence, cold and malevolent. His pulse raced, and his breath came in shallow gasps as the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, pulling him closer to the figure. "Leave," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Max turned to run, but before he could move, the cemetery gate slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic surged through him as he looked back at the glowing grave. The woman's head slowly rose, her eyes now visible, two hollow, dark pits of nothingness staring directly at him. "Leave now, or stay forever," she rasped, her voice growing louder, more insistent. Max sprinted towards the gate, his heart pounding in his chest, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the entire cemetery was alive with the voices of the dead. Desperate, Max glanced over his shoulder. The woman was no longer at the grave. She was standing behind him, her form impossibly close. Her cold breath brushed against his ear, sending a wave of dread through his body. Stay with me," she whispered. The ground trembled beneath his feet as a shadow stretched across the cemetery, consuming everything in its path. The glowing grave flickered once more, and then, with a final flash, the cemetery was engulfed in darkness. The next morning, the townspeople found the gate of the cemetery wide open. No one had seen Max since the night before, and the grave that had once glowed was now dark, silent, just like the rest of the abandoned cemetery. But if you visit the cemetery at night, they say you can still see the faint glow from the far corner where Max's grave now stands, flickering in the dark. The whispers have stopped, but sometimes, just before dawn, you can hear a soft voice calling from the grave.